Welcome to another episode of the Positive Change Podcast, a podcast that's all about challenging the status quo and inspiring new and positive change for yourself and for the world around you. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Harmer, and in this episode of the Positive Change Podcast, I answer questions from my clients, those things they most wanted to ask me about how I work and what I focused on in 2022. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Dr. Richard Harmer, and you're about to discover new ways to go from overwhelm to thriving in your business and in your life by following your passions, pursuing your unique life purpose, and stepping fully into your infinite potential. You deserve to live your best life, a life filled with all of the clarity, courage, and commitment you need to be happy and to make a positive impact on the world. So get ready, because this podcast challenges society's expectations for what it means to be successful in life and in business, and invites you to grow beyond outdated assumptions for defining who you are. Welcome to the Positive Change Podcast. In this edition of the Positive Change Podcast, I explore questions from some of my clients. In the lead into the end of 2022, I asked some of the people I've worked with this year to give me just the one question that they most wanted to know about me and how I work for the year. So let's start with a question from one of my clients who asked me, Richard, what was success for you in 2022? I guess we need to start here when we think about success in 2022 is what do I define as success? For many of my clients, success is things like achieving a goal or an outcome, increasing employee engagement or implementing that important change or improving profitability or taking this new innovation to market or having the board sign off on their strategy. Some of my clients think about how they feel about their work. So for me, I define success as making meaningful progress towards something or for something that I feel is important. And I take this really from some of the work of positive psychology and Martin Seligman, who makes a distinction between achievement, that is delivering an outcome that you either do or don't do, and accomplishment, that sense of meaningful progress towards that which matters. So I really think about success as something that's about meaningful progress. Whether I achieved the outcome or not is not necessarily a consideration. Now, I know it is for the clients and people I work with. They engage me because they're trying to get an outcome. But for me personally, sometimes I can work hard towards an outcome and it doesn't eventuate because there are a number of factors involved that are outside of my control. So how I think about success is meaningful progress. Those things that I care about, that I think are important, that others think are important, and did we make meaningful progress in those areas? So when I think about meaningful progress, it gets me thinking about, well, what domains in my life, not just in work, that I think are really important to make meaningful progress in, those things that are important to me. And this isn't a prioritized list, or maybe it is, but the first thing that comes to mind as I think about what was success for me in 2022 is myself and my family. Many of you who are listeners to this podcast know this already, but I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm married, and I have three boys, 15 years old, 12 and 10. It's really interesting because developmentally and at the stage that each of my boys are at, they're going through, adolescence, teenage, really trying to discover themselves. And I'm really noticing that this year, things like sport or academic performance or academic success is becoming increasingly important. And also for my eldest, a bit of evaluation against others. He's not just focused on himself. He's starting to think about, how do I fit into the world around me? How are my peer group performing? That sort of peer pressure part of being a teenager. I have to say that I think that with Belinda, my wife and I, we are really supporting and shepherding at times and cajoling at other times. But we're really supporting three boys to be good humans, thinking about not just themselves but the world around them, social issues, social justice, being a good friend, not holding themselves back, really, really having the courage to try new things. So this year, I think I made some meaningful progress in supporting and growing some good humans in my family. My personal health is pretty good. I've spent the last 3 or 4 months really focused on what I noticed the first half of the year is that I was really busy on the work front, and my physical health, that is my diet and exercise, was really taking a nosedive, and I've really focused on that in the last 3 to 4 months as I know that my physical well-being is a foundation stone for my mental well-being and my professional life. Next, I'll turn to friendships and my social group. Yeah, that's been a really, I'll say, a successful year as well, actually. I've made some meaningful progress there, but it hasn't always been roses. It hasn't always been effortless. There have been instances throughout the year where friendships that I've had for some time started to falter as those people that I care about and I started to focus on different things and have different priorities or different needs from our friendship. And some of those friendships didn't survive in the way that I had hoped. So as I share this with you on this podcast, that's not to say that I'm disappointed. Of course I am, but I also recognize that growth is inevitable and sometimes people grow in different directions. Now, even though some of my relationships have come to an end with some friends I've had for some time, that is where, I guess we're taking a break from each other. That has actually opened up some new pathways. Friends I've had for even longer that, due to a whole range of circumstances, being really busy, I haven't had a chance to connect with. And as some relationships start to move to the periphery, it's allowed those that have been on the periphery to come back into my core. And I must admit that some of those friends I have spent a less time with, that I've had more opportunities to connect with just through time and space, have been deeply rewarding. And then again, there's this core group of friends that I speak to and spend time with regularly. My support network, if you will, that those sounding boards, those people that I just have a laugh with, and sometimes I have a cry with. And they've been in my heart and in my mind for pretty consistently throughout the year, and I feel deeply rewarded by those relationships. And yeah, I've made some meaningful progress with those core group of friends as we continue to discover who we are both with and for each other throughout the year. Personally, those of you who listen to this podcast and know me well would know that one of the things that's really important to me is continuing to discover new perspectives and new understandings of myself and the world around me. My own personal growth, that is learning new things, and development, discovering more about my own awareness. And this year, I think I've made some really important progress in this space. I notice myself pausing as I'm on this podcast as I sort of settle into my own awareness more. That lived experience of my sense of who I am and my place in the world becoming more expansive, more considered, more integrated, more compassionate for sure. The sense of love and communion I feel with the people in my immediate surroundings, but also humanity at large has been quite significant for me this year. And I've noticed that I'm settling into my own self-understanding more and more. I also, and maybe I'll talk about this in a later podcast, I think, but I really recognize also that my own stage of development is transforming as I deepen into myself even more. And I'm really excited by that. You know, I did a meditation with a friend early in this year, exploring what the next phase of my own development might be. And there's some really interesting things I would like to explore in 2023 that I really got no idea where to start with, which is always a good sign for me. And so I look forward to sharing that as part of this podcast as we move on. I work with a really passionate group of clients who across a range of industries and a range of organizational sizes, and I work with some individuals as well. And wow, we've made some great progress this year. If I sort of break it down, I've supported more than directly and indirectly, I've supported more than 1,000 people to discover and deepen their connection to their work, their colleagues, and their contribution to the world. Some of these clients I'm working with are going through some really significant transformation that's been tough at times this year, as they're really trying to find the next phase, the next consideration for their future. And I really do feel proud of being able to be a touchstone, sounding board, sometimes a reality check for some of these organizations I work with, so that they stay true to themselves and not get distracted by bright, shiny toys. Finally, I want to talk about this project I work with some colleagues that's really about supporting the future of humanity. A project that's about supporting late stage practitioners. Now, late stage is those people who have dedicated their lives to expanding their own self-understanding and awareness towards adopting a understanding of the world that considers humanity as a whole, not individuals or not collections of people, not even society, but just thinking about and taking a perspective of humanity as a whole as their understanding. So I've been supporting these late stage practitioners, change makers, custodians of our collective consciousness for a year now with a couple of colleagues of mine, and it has been deeply rewarding work. And I've really discovered for myself in that work a universal, unconditional love and a sense of freedom that I haven't necessarily experienced in previous years. So that's success, meaningful progress. And I've made some great progress in my family, friendships, personal space, work and professional life, and in how I'm supporting practitioners, custodians of our collective consciousness. And I can see a really virtual relationship between each of these domains or aspects of my life. I can see that overall, just in reflecting on these things, that I've been present and helpful to others in ways that's supportive. Also elevates myself and my own universal consciousness along the way. I remember reading this quote some time ago by an author, Hunter Thompson, a journalist and author, who wrote, "Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to be skidded in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, 'Wow, what a ride.'" That's really where I see my life. It's not about playing safe. It's about really being fully deserving of all of my experiences, whether they be good, bad, or indifferent. Not living or not having a sense of fear of, am I deserving enough to fully bask in the joy and excitement that my life brings. And I've noticed this year, I've made meaningful progress in playing large. And I think this sets me up really well for what comes next. The next 3 or 4 years, maybe I'll talk about this in another podcast. One of my clients asked me about what my hopes and dreams and fears of the future. So I'm going to talk about that in a subsequent episode of the Positive Change podcast. But at this point, I feel that this year's been a really great foundation for what's coming next. So my ask of you in this podcast is to ask a similar question. What's success to you? And how will you know that you're making meaningful progress for yourself? And what are you most deserving to experience? Until next time, stay well. Hi, and thank you so much for checking out another episode of the Positive Change podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe using the button below, and make sure you also click the bell icon to get notified every time we release a new episode. If you're looking for the show notes for this episode, we have them in the link underneath, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and other offers that we drop from time to time to help you go from overwhelmed to thriving in pursuing your best life. So go ahead and check out this episode's show notes if you're interested. And thank you so much for tuning into the Positive Change podcast.